Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Childless Not by Choice, where my mission is to recognize and speak to the childless not by choice women and men around the world. Civilla Morgan here. I am spreading the great news that we can live a joyful, relevant, and fulfilled life, although we did not have the children we so wanted. Welcome to episode 116, 116, and welcome to February. I hope you have taken a moment and gone to the shop page of the website, childlessnotbychoice.net, for your link to blueprints for your goals and visions. This blueprint will walk you through your goals and visions for the entire year. And the best part is you can use the same blueprint every year. So you spend money once and you keep using the same blueprint each year, and it helps you every single year. The link will be in the show notes, and I think it's a great way to get your new year off to a great start. Well, we have a special guest today. On today's show, we have an award-winning podcaster who has been podcasting since April 2005, like literally day one of podcasting. He has been helping people understand technology for over 20 years. He launched the School of Podcasting in 2005 and has helped hundreds of people launch podcasts. He has recorded hundreds of episodes, maybe even thousands of his own. And he is literally one of the OGs of podcasting. And he is in the Podcasting Hall of Fame. How do I rate this interview? Dave Jackson, welcome to Childless Not by Choice.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I do appreciate you taking the time to be here, and I wanted to get started right away with our interview. And some people may be asking, well, okay, what does all of this have to do with Childless Not by Choice? We'll get to that in just a minute. But I have a couple of questions for you. How many podcasts total do you have?
Oh my goodness, I've started over 30. I mean,
Wow.
half of them were experiments and they lasted, like I started one called the Customer Service Show because that was my background, and I did about 5 episodes. I just sounded like a grumpy old man complaining, and I was like, all right, that's enough of that. Right now I have about 5, I think. If I do School of Podcasting, Your Podcast Consultant, Ask the Podcast Coach, the Logical Weight Loss Podcast. What am I missing? Building a Better Dave. So that's 5. Building a
I,
Better Dave is one I kind of rarely do. I kind of sneak in and out of that one.
what's that one about?
It is basically, it's funny, when I first started podcasting, I had a podcast about everything I was into. So I had a podcast about podcasting. I had a thing about web design. I had a weight loss show that I started because I wanted to lose some weight. And then I had one about my faith. And then I had one that I was like, well, sometimes I just want to talk about goofy stuff or just something that's on my mind or whatever. So Building a Better Dave originally was started, I was going to do online dating. And I thought, well, this is going to lead to some fun stories. So it did. It led to me finding my second wife. And then it led me, we got to hear all the struggles and why she's now my ex-wife. So it's always been one to at times almost be my therapy. I always tell people, I'm like, don't listen to that show. It's horrible. There are times when when I was married the second time, I lived away from my family. I was completely isolated, and there were just times when I just want to throw stuff out to the universe. And for whatever reason, I did that into a microphone, and now you get to listen to it. It's really not that good.
Well, I mean, there are some of us that we like to write. It's like
Yeah.
we need to write. There's just, I mean, if you don't get to write, it would be like really a difficult life. And I think talking and podcasting, it's the same thing. You want to talk into a microphone. It's kind of like journaling, I guess.
Yeah, and it's bizarre, and at times I'm almost talking to myself.
Hmm.
Like when I hear the words come back to me that came out of my mouth, I'm like, well, what would I say to that guy? I'd be like, well, hold on, little buckaroo, life's not that bad. You can hang in there kind of stuff. So it's funny because I have people like that audience. I don't have a very big audience on that show at all, but yet they're diehard. Like the minute I go without doing an episode for a month, they're like, what's going on? Where's the next one? And I'm like, okay, I'll come up with something, I guess. So it's kind of fun.
I'm going to have to check that out. What's the name of it again?
It's called Building a Better Dave. Right now I'm doing, they call it National Podcast, NAPOD POMO. Basically means you do an episode every day for November. So
Right.
I've just blasted that whole audience every day. In fact, I got to record one tonight, and it's just been little itty bitty stories about my life and weird things that I think about and things like that. So it's,
Okay, I'm gonna check that out.
yeah, it's different.
I think the one I listen to the most is School of Podcasting, and I think I'm caught up right now. So that's the one of all of the ones that you have that I'm not saying that any of them are the rest of them aren't any good. They are, I'm sure, but that's the one I listen to the most, and I get a lot of great information from School of Podcasting. So thanks for, and that's episode, what episode number are you at now?
693, I think, was what
Wow.
I just put out. So I know I'm coming up on 700, and I finally just decided, rather than put pressure on myself, I'm not going to do anything for 700. I've kind of tried to do something every 100, and
Hmm.
I would break my format, and I would do something kind of wacky or different. And I can't. I'm out of ideas. I don't know what to
Yeah.
do. I mean, last at 600, we did like an Ask Me Anything, and I've done different skits and comedy. I'm just like, I'm just going to go look. Thanks for listening. Let's move on to 701, shall we?
Wow, that's amazing. 700 episodes. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, and it can be a lot of pressure, and you can tend to run out of things, I would imagine, at 700 episodes. But thank you for that podcast. That's all I can tell you. It's an awesome podcast, and I learned quite a bit. But continuing on, congratulations again on all of the accolades and the accomplishments and the successes in the world of podcasting. And I think I read that you have a teaching degree as well.
Yeah, I've been helping people understand technology for, I'll put it this way. I used to teach how to surf the internet because nobody knew what it was, and how to
Mhm,
send emails. So I've been doing it a long time. And my original degree was in electronic engineering, and I
mm,
was a copier technician. And my boss said, "You seem to have the gift of gab. We're going to put you into a trainer's position where you go out, set up the equipment using your technology brain, and then you're going to turn around and teach people how to run the equipment." And that worked really, really well. We had a much better trained customer who didn't break the equipment all the time. To which they said, "Do you know anything about computers?" And I said, "Yeah." So they got me teaching computers, and it just, every time I turned around, but I never had a teaching degree. So
mm.
I was with that company for 10 years and one employee of the year even. And one day they put me into a new role. I had a new role there about every 4 years. And it kind of was like a bad game of musical chairs where all of a sudden the music stopped and they went, "Oh, what are we going to do with Dave?" And they were very nice. And if you can be fired in a nice way, they did. But in the process then of going to get a teaching job, all the different companies like, "You don't have a teaching degree." So I had to go back and get one at the ripe old age of 42, which was fun
Hmm.
because you'd walk in and people were like, "Are you the teacher?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a student." But yeah, so I did that for a while, and once again was told, "You're one of our best trainers." But it just, I always wanted to say, why didn't they fire the sales guys that couldn't sell training? But that's not the way it worked. And so on my way out of the parking lot of once again being let go, made a call to Libsyn, which is a podcast media hosting company, and politely said, "Do you guys hire anybody over there?" And lucky enough, they did. So I knew some
Hmm.
people over there, and I've been working with them now for 3 years.
And Libsyn, by the way, Liberated Syndication is the platform I host the Childless Not by Choice podcast with. Great company. If any of you are interested in podcasting and you wonder what host to use, Libsyn is the one I've been using for the last 4 going on 5 years. So that's a great hosting platform. So let's pivot a little bit here then.
Sure.
you how have you decided to deal with the parts of life that did not work? Because you talk about walking out into the parking lot after that last, that previous gig. What do you do with the parts of life that don't work out? And you talked about being divorced for a
Yeah.
second time. What do you do to make life work for you?
I think part of it is, I mean, in the early days, I just have a faith in God.
Hmm.
One of my favorite verses is Jeremiah 29:11, that just says basically, and I will paraphrase this really short. Basically, God says, "I got your back.
Hmm.
Things aren't going to be perfect, but don't worry, I got it handled." Uh, and so when I was younger, that really got me through a lot of stuff. When my first marriage, we spent ourselves into bankruptcy trying to have a kid,
Hmm.
and she had a cyst. So she only had one ovary, and then she had endometriosis. So we were trying for months to have a kid, and we ended up charging fertility treatments, which is not something I recommend. In fact,
No.
when I did it, I was like, this is a really bad idea. I go, we can't, at this point, if we have a kid, we're not going to be able to afford it. And then 9/11 hit after we charged up all these credit cards,
Mm.
and she got her hours cut, and that's all it took.
Wow.
Because all of a sudden we couldn't pay the bills, and we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so that was one that you just kind of go, okay, and I think the older you get, it takes more to really, I guess, shock you. Or
Yeah.
because I was just kind of like, when I lost my job the second time, I was like, well, here's one of those fun-filled adventures. Let's see where this goes, kind of
Mm.
thing. And that doesn't mean I wasn't worried or scared. I was like, oh, I had a little bit of money in the bank, but not a lot of savings. And I was like, that's going to go real quick here,
Mhm.
and so I think part of that is, I don't want to call it wisdom, but just the fact that when you've gone through a few of these things, you kind of you don't quite sweat it as much, I think. And plus, I had been smarter. I had put some money away in the bank, so in the event something like this happened, I think that's part of it. I just realized that every job you have, I think every employer now has the right to terminate you for no apparent reason whatsoever. And I just went, well, if that's the way we're going to play, I should probably have some money in the bank to at least hold me over for a little bit while I try to find something else.
Yeah, I thought that was just Florida. That's in
Yeah,
other
it's
states?
yeah, it's usually written in the thing where it's funny because you're supposed to give notice, but they can fire you whenever they want. And
Right,
you're like,
you have to give 2 weeks to,
yeah,
yeah. They call Florida a right to work state, so yes, they can fire you at
yeah.
will.
So yeah,
It's
so it's kind of like, well, okay, so, and especially now, when I was let go that time, I'm trying to remember if I was still married or not.
Mhm.
I don't think let's see, 3 years ago, it would have been really close. I think it was right after I got divorced, actually.
Wow. So this
And
was the
yeah,
2nd marriage.
yeah. So yeah, I'd been married. The first marriage was for 15 years.
Mm.
When we couldn't have a kid, that's just, I mean, that's what we're here to talk about. It's devastating.
Mhm.
And so we had gone through all these different treatments, and finally we just had a doctor that looked at us and said, you're not going to be able to conceive. And I was hurt, obviously, but I
Mhm.
was also somewhat relieved because I was like, we're out of money.
Yeah.
We can't do this anymore. Um, and the really horrible part was, because we were so underwater, I then took a different position at the job I had that led me to travel. Well, that's the worst thing I could have done for my wife,
Mhm.
because she really, really needed me for just to support. And so while I was out keeping the lights on, she was off turning into an alcoholic. And that was pretty much between the kid thing and the alcoholism. And then later she ended up cheating on me, which I don't hold any grudge on that, because again, I kind of left when she really, really needed me, and I thought I
Yeah.
was doing the right thing by keeping the lights on. But looking back, I'm kind of like, well, that was really dumb. So it's tricky. So yeah, this one I married the second time, and I think maybe part of it was it came with kids. She had 3 kids. Their biological father had kind of started a new family and forgot he had one to start with, and so I was like, well, this is great. I get teenagers. This is awesome. And they liked me and I liked them. But the problem was, I dated her while I was going to school, and she lived about an hour away from me. So we really only saw each other on the weekends. And
Mm.
she later kind of admitted that, and this is such a weird word to use, but she somewhat bullied me into getting married, because I'd always said, hey, once I get out of school and I graduate, we can start dating like normal. And she had figured out, well, I found this really great guy. I want to get him married right now. So we ended
Mhm.
up getting married like a month after I graduated from college, and we knew 6 months in, we're like, ooh, we probably should have had a long engagement thing. Maybe not a bad idea. So we stuck it out for 8 years. We went to a lot of counseling, and we're still friends. It was just one of
Mhm.
those things where we just woke up one day, went, you know what? I've heard people say this, and I thought it would never. I was like, how do you do that? But we really shouldn't have got married in the first place, because you're like, wait, how do you marry somebody? You're like, you kind of fall in love with love, and
Yeah.
and kind of lose reality. So, but I still have relationships with my stepkids. I always say I divorced your mom, I didn't divorce you. And so that's kind of the one thing that came out of that I'm still kind of proud of.
So you get to be a father figure for kids whose father just kind of walked
Yeah.
away.
Well, it was kind
Yeah.
of funny because it's almost like, if you remember summer camp or high school, and you're like, oh, we'll be friends forever. And then everybody just kind of,
Yeah.
goes their own separate ways. So when we got divorced, I'm like, hey, if you guys ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Hmm.
And so the youngest is, I think he's 22 now. But he actually one day did reach out, and he said, "Do you know anything about WordPress?" I said, "I work in it every single day." And I told him, I said, "Look, I wasn't just being polite. I said, I really mean this. If you need anything ever, don't hesitate to reach out." And then I guess it's probably about a year and a half ago, their grandpa died.
Mm.
So my ex-wife called and said, if you'd like to come to the funeral, it'd be great to see you. So we're friends, and we kind of work that way. And actually last year, she invited me up for Christmas. And again, it was just to kind of catch up.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where we've kind of just where it took us a while. Look, when we get divorced, you're not happy to see anybody. But as time has gone on, it's like, look, we realized we made a mistake. And when we're not talking about money or our relationship, my ex-wife and I are actually decent friends. In fact, she's re-engaged. So I'm happy for her at this point.
Mm. Okay. So you, in a roundabout way, got the kids, but really, the fact is, you were never able to have the children. And you said something a little bit back a few minutes ago, where you said you were relieved. Back to the first marriage, you said you were relieved when the doctor
Yeah.
just looked at you guys and said, "Look, it's not going to happen." We all have the opportunity to kick ourselves for decisions that we've made, and you decided to go to work, but you were doing the best you could. But yeah, she
Well,
was in a tough spot. She really was mentally, emotionally, physically in a tough spot.
yeah. Well, the other fun part of that equation is my parents. I have an older brother and I have a sister. Well, my older brother was already done having kids, and he had two girls. And so it was always kind of like, all right, if we're going to keep the Jackson name going on, no pressure, but it's up to you, buddy.
Hmm.
And so it was always like, oh, we got to have kids, which again is somewhat of a weird kind of thing. Like, what the world needs is more me. It's weird that way, but I've always wanted kids. I always want to just have a station wagon full.
Hmm.
And so that was the plan. And then it was like, I remember my first wife saying, hey, look, because I was her boyfriend when she had to go in and have her one ovary removed. And I said, hey, we only need one. We just need one. It's, no big deal. And if we have to practice a little more, well, hey, the more the merrier.
Hmm.
And then when she had endometriosis, then we're like, oh, that's and the part that made that hard is I don't know, there's probably some sort of syndrome for it. But my mom died when I was fairly young. I was 24.
Mm.
And ever since that day, it's a very hit or miss. I so wish I could predict it, but I can't. But there are times if I go into a hospital and I don't know, there's certain things trigger it.
Yeah.
I will drop like a rock, like pass out, sweaty, the whole nine yards. My niece was in labor and I was there to help her, and everything was perfectly fine. And then all she had to do was have one contraction and went, and next thing I know, my brother's picking me off the floor, and
Oh my goodness.
it just looks like somebody threw a bucket of water on me. It's really bizarre. So I was going through that in the fertility stuff, because I remember there was something that my first wife went through, some sort of test where I just remember I had to wear a lead um, like vest.
Hmm.
There was some sort of big X-ray going on or whatever as they were examining different things. I know it was painful for her, whatever they were doing. And I
Hmm.
was over there, and I just remember she squeezed my hand, and all of a sudden I just started sweating. And I said, I really hate to see this, but I said, but I've got to go over there and put my head between my knees or I'm going to pass out.
That's how, wow.
And it's really weird. I remember once the one doctor had brought in, he was trying to explain what was going on with the endometriosis, and he brought out pictures of like her insides, and he's
Hmm.
trying to explain. And the more he talked, I just looked up and I said, okay, we have to, like, you can explain this to her, but I can't, for whatever reason, something's getting triggered here and I'm about ready to lose it. So it's very, like I say, I wish I could control it. My dad had colon cancer, And I was like, oh, this is, here we go. I got to go back into a hospital. Never had a single problem with any of that ever. So, and about the time I thought, I was fine, I'll watch something on TV that's maybe a little gory. And again, sometimes gore, no problem. Other
Mhm.
times, this happened to be the movie Concussion with Will Smith. And they were
Mhm.
just talking about finely slicing a brain. That was it. They were just talking about it, not showing anything. And off we went to the races. And I was like, this is so annoying. So that's, that's a lovely side effect of this whole thing, I think. But the pressure of hey, you need to get us a boy going on was, I think, another thing that when they finally said, hey, I don't think this is going to happen for you guys. I was kind of like, okay, because that was a lot of pressure. At least now I could say, well, we tried. We we spent ourselves into bankruptcy.
Well, I mean, sometimes we put pressure on ourselves. I know I put pressure on myself to have a child
Mm,
because I wondered, I wanted to know what my child would look like, how my
mm,
child would, how it would look like me, normal, maybe not so normal thoughts
sure.
to people who have children, but you just wonder, wow, if I had a little girl, would she have my skin color? If I had a little boy, would he? What would he look like? How would he act? How would I? And I always said I wanted, if I had children, I would train them to be able to live in any place they find themselves, whether it's in the big city or the country or anyone. They can interact with anybody, regardless of race or socioeconomic background. I
Yeah,
wanted to raise them to be able to interact with everybody and to love people, but still be strong and be aware of their surroundings. I grew up in Boston, just outside
mm,
of Boston. So, you know, you you learn how to fend for yourself, you
sure.
know? And so I wanted this kid to be able to fend for him or herself, but still be a kind person and have a good heart. And I think you could have both. And it just never happened. I was really putting pressure on me. And then my brother has three boys.
Mm,
So he's perpetuating the Morgan name.
right.
So, but and that makes me feel a little bit better, but I didn't get to make a contribution. And then I sometimes wondered how my parents felt that they didn't get any grandchildren from me. I mean, you could really dig yourself into a hole with this
Oh
whole
yeah.
childlessness thing.
I know for me, when as I was growing up, my dad was a great dad. He just wasn't around. He was a long distance truck driver, so he'd leave on maybe Friday night and come back on maybe Wednesday. Spend a couple days at home, fix whatever we broke while he was out, and then leave again. And that
Mhm.
was just the way it was. And so I was always the person that was like, boy, when I have kids, I'm going to be there every day, because I remember being at a park once and they had this like father son thing, three-legged race. And I just had to sit there on the sidelines and watch because he
Mm.
wasn't there. And I thought, that's never going to be me. I'm going to be the world's greatest dad and this and that. So, you have these ideas of this is what it's going to be like. And you're just chomping at the bit to, put me in, coach.
Right.
And then when it doesn't happen, you're like, okay. But, I guess for me, I was like, well, okay, I'm going to be the best uncle ever then, because I have
Yeah.
two great nieces, and now I have great nieces and nephews. My youngest one is 5, and she just calls me Unc. She
Mhm.
she she started to call me Uncle Dave, and she goes, I don't like that. She goes, I'm just going to call you Unc, and I'm like, that's perfect. So it's a lot of fun, and I'm going to all the baseball games, the football games, and everything I can to support, which is what my mom always did, and and that's really, I think, in the end, I think you just have to be there for whoever you're trying to support.
Mhm.
And I think, I'm sure if I got on a psychiatrist chair, I'm sure podcasting in a way has been some sort of therapy, in the fact that, okay, well, I don't have any kids, so people throw out the word legacy, and sometimes I think that's a little too strong a word, maybe. But I was like, well, how am I going to live on? And when I found podcasting, I was like, this is a way I could kind of influence, mentor, help people. And that's really, in a way, isn't that what parenting is? Influencing, mentoring,
Mhm.
helping, guiding, things like that. So I'm sure it's not the exact same, but for me, it's the closest thing I got, and that's why I enjoy it so much.
Well, I don't know how you know this,
Mm.
how this just happened, but that was literally my next question.
Mm.
I mean, seriously, my question is, do you think that getting to teach, whether children or would-be podcasters, is the salve to your heart and to your life.
Yeah, I do believe so. It's not, there's always going to be something there that's the fear of missing out, for lack of a better phrase. You always kind of
Mhm.
like, I was walking through an airport because no, like 90% of the time I'm okay,
Mhm.
but I happen to be walking through an airport and the most absolutely just adorable, this little girl with red hair, and she's in like this little pink dress, and I don't know who daddy was, but she was sure happy to see him, and she's running through the airport just screaming, daddy,
Mhm.
daddy, daddy. And I'm thinking, oh man, I wish that was me, because that
Yeah.
that girl's just adorable, and her mom's behind her trying to drag along this luggage and stuff. And
Mhm.
I just thought to myself, I don't know who daddy is, but I hope he knows just how absolutely lucky he is
Yeah.
to have that in his life. So there are times like that when I'm like, okay, that stung a little bit. Or you see a TV show and, somebody talks about, you don't know what it's like until you have your own kid and you hold it in your arms. I'm like, okay, thanks. Enough, please. You know, but yeah, I think it does. I think that's why I'm so passionate about it. I have a guy right now that just has an insane story that he's trying to tell about his upbringing, and I feel very much like the dad in the pool, looking up at the kid going, hey, jump in, the water's fine, I will catch you, it's okay, it's safe, just jump. And so I definitely feel like that when people start a podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with just doing the best with what you have
Yeah.
and living the best life you can. And as I always say, the best, most relevant, and joyful life that you can, even though you didn't get everything out of it, you do the best with what you can, because I mean the alternative would be to be a really miserable person and treat everybody miserably
Right.
and wonder why you're so alone. And like you, I think I'm okay 90% of the time too,
Hmm.
until you hear people say things that they mean well, they don't mean to hurt you, but
Right.
they do when they say make comments like, "You're not a parent, so you wouldn't understand," or
Oh,
"You don't
yeah.
know what it's like until you're a parent," and things, even little things that really are true, like you don't get to sleep again after you have a child, no matter
Yeah.
how old the child becomes, because you're always worried about that kid, you know, whether the child is 1 or 18 or
Yeah.
50, you're a parent. Although I mean, we're probably around the same age, but I know, well, my mom passed 6 months ago, but
Hmm.
I know for a fact that you're the kid to your parents. You may not be a kid, but you're your parents' kid.
Yeah.
What I guess I'm trying to say. So, it's tough when you hear people say things that they really don't mean to be mean, but it kind of triggers you or puts a little pinprick in your heart, and you just have to decide to be strong and just keep on moving and doing the best with what you get to do, which in your case is being a podcaster and a podcaster's podcaster and helping
Ye-
people.
yeah, I think it was Michael Hyatt I listened to when he said, when something happens that you didn't plan. I think in his case, I think he hurt his foot or something where he wasn't very mobile for a while, and he said, "Okay, this is not going to work because normally he travels a bunch." He goes, "But what does this enable me to do that I couldn't have done before?" And he goes, "Well, it finally gave me the chance to sit down and focus on my writing and a couple other things like that." So I've always liked that thought. And when things happen that either you don't like or you didn't plan or whatever, I always try to look at that and go, okay, well, this is horrible and I feel bad, but also what does this enable me to do that I couldn't do before? So
Mm,
um, I had a cat for 17 years. And when he went to the big litter box in the sky, of course, I was very sad, but I was
mhm,
like, but what does this enable me to do? And the last year, especially, I've done a lot of traveling because I don't have to worry about getting home to clean the litter box or have somebody come and check on the cat or things like that. It's really given me a little more freedom to do other things. So I always try to look at that aspect because it's kind of funny when I talk to guys that are married with children and they hear that I can do pretty much whatever I want whenever I want.
mhm.
There you can see a part of them are like, oh man, if I could be in your shoes. And then they'll tell me about, oh, I came home and the kid was doing this and that, and voila, and I got to get ready for a birthday party. And in my shoes, I'm like, oh, I would do anything to be in your shoes right now.
Mhm.
So I think we all kind of, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence kind of thing.
Right, and so we just have to do the best with the grass that's on our side.
That's right. And take time to appreciate,
Mhm.
what you have. So
That's true. So you kind of that is kind of, that is a word of encouragement what you just said, but could you leave us with a word of encouragement?
keep your eyes open for either new opportunities or things of that nature. I know I can at times, if I really don't kind of check myself, I if I really start focusing on, I'll give you an example. I found an old videotape from 1988, and I was watching, and it was great. And it had my mom and dad were both in it, my grandparents, and a couple uncles and aunts. And I looked at it, and one of them was my cousin Paul. So there's 6 people on the screen, and I looked up, and in my I heard that lovely little voice in your head that goes, "Wow, everybody on the screen is dead."
Mm,
And I was like, wow, and then so I was like, I really started thinking about that, and just, how, Thanksgivings just aren't the same. Christmas isn't the same as it was in your childhood and things like that. And that's when I was like, okay, I could really just obsess over this and go, wow, you know what? Christmas really isn't the same. Well, of course it's not. You're not a
right,
kid. So but then it's a matter of like, okay, but Christmas is coming up, or Thanksgiving, or birthdays, or whatever holidays coming up. What can I do to either start a new tradition, if an old tradition has gone by the wayside? Okay, let's come up with a new one or something like that. And just because it's not the way you wanted it to be doesn't mean it has to be awful. In fact, it might actually be better. You never know, but you're not going to know unless you try. So don't give up. And I always end the we talked earlier about the Building a Better Dave show,
mhm,
and I always end it when I said, and keep in mind, it's going to get better, because it's either A, you're going to die, which in my case is a whole lot better. Not that I want to die, but I'm a believer in heaven, so I'm like,
mhm.
I'm all for that. And if not, it's just hang in there, and see what happens.
That's an awesome word. And you did mention your faith earlier. And I think a lot of my listeners know that I am a Christian as well, although I don't lead with that on the podcast.
Right.
And so I'm a believer as well. And as I listen to you talk about everybody on the screen that you were looking at, and the fact that a lot of the listeners also know, and I just mentioned that I lost my mom 6 months ago. I think about, and I'm going to therapy, and
Mhm.
that's a big thing for me. I always talk about going to therapy. And so, the therapist told me at the last meeting, it's really weird that you said this, but she said, we're going to have to start doing new things and different things because it's not going to be the same without my mom. And so we're going to have to be okay with changing traditions and making
Yeah.
new traditions. And as we continue on through life, as my dad always says, and death is a part of life, and we
Mm.
know that. And those of us who are Christians are thankful that we believe that we're going to a place when we die. But in the meantime, while we're here, as you say, we just have to do the best with what we have, where we are, and where we're headed. Just be positive about as much as possible. We're going to have our
Right.
down days and our up days, but just try to be as positive and as giving and as helpful as we possibly can. So I do appreciate those words of encouragement. Um, I did look you up online just in case anybody wants to know where else they can find you. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I have schoolofpodcasting.com, askthepodcastcoach.com, and davidjackson.org. I don't know about that last one.
Yeah, that's just a blog I have. I don't do much over there.
Okay.
Probably the easiest thing, if you want to see all my podcasts at least, just remember the website powerofpodcasting.com has pretty much everything I do over there.
Okay. Powerofpodcasting.com. Okay, I'll put that in the show notes for anyone who's interested in finding out more about Dave Jackson and about podcasting. And Dave, I want to thank you once again for taking the time to come on the show. I think I learned quite a bit, and I believe that the listeners have as well. And I really do appreciate you being on here tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And I also want to, before we sign off, thank my Patreon patrons, Jordan Morgan and the Knights, Olive and Alphonse Knight. Thank you so much for your patronage. It is appreciated. And thanks to those of you listening, it's appreciated. Stay tuned for the next episode. And I really hope that you enjoyed this episode because I really did. Until next time, have a great one. Bye.